The glass shattered against the side of my skull, champagne blood, and silence splashed across the marble floor. I didn't scream. I just stood there blinking through the fizz and pain as my mother set down her empty flute and Dorian looked away. The string quartet kept playing. The scent of bergamot candles clung to the air like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just been assaulted for saying no. No, I won't hand over my $520,000 condo. No, I won't let blood dictate ownership. Tell me, where are you listening from? And if you've ever had to choose dignity over family, hit subscribe. This is just the beginning. I never wanted the condo. It was a gift one my grandmother left behind in a quiet folded envelope tucked between her Bible pages and a handwritten note that said simply, "For the one they always overlook." That was me. I've lived in the same 2-bedroom apartment in Midtown Monarch Bay for nearly 12 years now. It's not grand, not even particularly modern. But the afternoon light hits just right across the kitchen counter, and the tile in the hallway still smells faintly of lemon oil whenever I mop. It's mine, the only thing in this world that is. The rest, the family name, the inherited wealth, the sprawling estate on Rosewind Hill, that all belong to someone else. To Dorian, my older brother, golden boy turned real estate tycoon. Every family photo in our house growing up had him at the center. I was somewhere near the edge, often cropped out when my mother arranged them for holiday cards. And yet I stayed close, out of duty maybe, or maybe just inertia. I sat through baby showers for cousins I never spoke to, hosted Thanksgiving when our parents wanted something smaller, signed every birthday card with perfect cursive. None of it meant belonging, not really. So when I got the invitation to Dorian's 45th birthday gala, I already knew what it was. Not a celebration, a setup. It arrived in a black envelope with a wax seal, the kind meant to signal prestige, but felt more like a warning. Inside, gold lettering, floral script, and a line that made my fingers go still. Family discussion over strategic asset contributions to follow. Formal attire, strategic asset contributions. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. I set the invitation down beside the coffee mug I hadn't finished, my fingers curling around the ceramic as if heat could anchor me. They wanted my condo, all $520,000 of it, because according to Dorian's latest venture, a multi-tiered luxury complex for intergenerational living, the Midtown property aligned with the expansion grid. And to Mother, anything that aligned with Dorian's vision wasn't just acceptable, it was divine. I looked out the window that afternoon, watching as the wind stirred the potted rosemary on my balcony. The scent curled into my apartment, familiar grounding. The condo was in my name, the deed filed clean, and yet I could already feel them reaching for it like it was their birthright. Maybe it was foolish to go to that party. Maybe I should have ignored the envelope, the emails, the calls. But I've learned something about power. Sometimes the only way to take it back is to show up, even when they expect you to bend, especially then. The valet took my keys before I'd even unbuckled my seatbelt. From the stone steps of Rourke Manor, I could already hear the faint hum of a string quartet, playing something Vivaldi-controlled elegant like everything Mother planned. Inside, the chandeliers blazed brighter than I remembered, and the scent of white gardenias hit me like a wave. It always smelled like this expensive, curated suffocating. Waiters floated between guests with silver trays of caviar canapes and crystal flutes. Everyone looked airbrushed like a lifestyle spread in a trust fund magazine. Celeste, a soft voice, called from behind a column. I turned. Henrietta Rourke stood in a navy satin gown that shimmered like oil under the lights. Her pearls, real of course, rested perfectly above her collarbone. "Darling, come with me a moment." Not a request, a direction. I followed her through the hallway lined with family portraits where every ancestor stared down with an expression that said, "We built this." She led me into the reading room, the one with mahogany shelves and locked liquor drawers. When she closed the door, the music and chatter outside vanished. In its place, silence and the slow tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. "I won't keep you long," she said, pouring herself a glass of white. "I know you're uncomfortable at these things." I didn't respond. She sipped, then set the glass down with careful grace. "Dorian's project. It's magnificent. You've read the proposal, I assume." I hadn't. I knew the headlines. That was enough. "Your property," she said almost casually, "sits on a corner that's crucial to the continuity of the model. It would be selfish not to contribute." There it was. I let the words settle, not shouted, not demanded, coated in silk and obligation. "A condo gathering dust," she added, smiling. "Isn't it better in the hands of someone building something real?" She stepped closer. "I know you've grown attached to it, but Dorian has vision, purpose. We all make sacrifices for those who carry the future." She reached for my hand, then cool fingers, manicured and precise. "Do the right thing, Celeste." I looked at her, at the pearls, the wine glass, the carefully staged warmth. And I said nothing, because the thing about silence is it makes people think they've won. Until it doesn't. When I stepped back into the main hall, the light seemed even brighter, or maybe it was just the weight of what I'd just heard. The quartet still played, but now the tempo had shifted into something more celebratory. Waiters passed out miniature cakes with sparklers. A toast was brewing. Dorian stood at the center of the room, a spotlight catching the sheen of his tailored lapels, champagne in hand, smile preloaded. "Thank you, everyone," he began, his voice commanding but rehearsed. "I'm honored to celebrate this milestone surrounded by family friends and the foundation of everything I've built." Polite applause followed. He paused just long enough to glance at our parents, who beamed like they'd trained him for this exact performance. "And tonight, I'm proud to share that our vision for the Monarch Collective is finally coming together. And thanks to the generosity of my sister, we've secured the final keystone lot. Her midtown condo will anchor the west end of the project." My breath didn't catch. My heart didn't race. I simply stood there, center left of the crowd, holding a glass of something I hadn't tasted. A few heads turned toward me, smiles waiting for confirmation. Mother stepped forward, her voice light. "Celeste has always understood the meaning of family. We're so proud of her decision." Lies, tidy, palatable, expensive lies. The room buzzed with admiration. Someone near me whispered, "That's so selfless of her." I raised my glass slowly, not to toast, but to speak. "Actually," I said, voice clear but unraised, "I haven't agreed to anything." The room stilled. It was subtle like a ripple across fine china. I saw Dorian blink. Mother's smile froze mid-tilt. "I wasn't consulted, I wasn't asked, and I haven't signed a thing." I sipped the drink, then dry brute, sharp, let it burn its way down. A silence deeper than music followed. I looked at them both. Dorian jawed tight behind his smile. Henrietta already recalibrating. I didn't move, I didn't explain. Let the lie rot under its own weight. Because sometimes the loudest refusal is the one that echoes when you say nothing more. The bottle didn't break right away. It bounced once off the edge of my shoulder before the second hit found my temple. That's when the glass split and the champagne hissed out like a mockery of a toast. The room gasped, but no one moved. I felt the wetness first cold sticky, then the sting as a sharp edge kissed the side of my face. Blood mixed with bubbles dripping down into the collar of my dress. My hand rose instinctively, fingertips brushing over something warm and slick. When I looked at them, red, still glistening under the chandeliers. Dorian stood over me, shoulders heaving, the neck of the broken bottle still clenched in his fist. His eyes were wild, and beneath the rage fear. Of what I'd said, of what I might say next. Mother was the first to speak, her voice low, brittle. "Dorian," but not a word to me, not even my name. Not a hand reached out. Not one guest stepped forward. The music had stopped, but the silence screamed. I straightened slowly, wiping my palm against the fabric of my coat. It smeared red down the gray wool like a final signature. I looked at Dorian, then Mother, then the room. Dozens of faces blurred behind flutes and fear and decorum. I said nothing. I turned heels, echoing against the marble, as I walked past the buffet table, past the musicians frozen in confusion, past the place cards with our family name embossed in gold. At the doors, a waiter looked at me, just a boy. He flinched as I passed. The wind hit hard when I stepped outside, sharp against the wetness trickling down my temple. But I welcomed the cold. It was honest, unlike the warmth I'd left behind. In the reflection of the polished rolls parked out front, I saw myself hair mussed, dress stained, eyes steady. I touched the bruise beginning to bloom and whispered to no one. This was the last party I'll ever attend as their daughter. Then I walked away, leaving blood on the steps and silence in their legacy. Back in my apartment, I peeled off the blood-streaked coat and dropped it in the bathtub. It slumped there like something no longer alive. The gash on my temple wasn't deep, but it throbbed like a metronome. I pressed an ice pack to it, the coolness blooming sharp behind my eyes. My fingers moved on autopilot. Open the cabinet, pull the metal box from behind the cleaning supplies. Combination grandmother's birthday. The safe clicked open with a sigh. Inside, birth certificate, deed to the condo. The handwritten letter I'd never reread until now. It was brief. Whatever they try to say, this is yours, never doubt it. Her ink was faded, but the intent burned. I flipped through the documents, organizing them by date, until something unfamiliar caught my eye. A stapled packet, legal formatting, the condo address in the header. And my signature. I froze. Not just any scrawl. My name in my handwriting. On a line that read, "Transfer of property Celeste Rourke to Rourke Family Holdings." Dated 18 months ago. Except I had never signed this. I would have remembered. I would have fought. My stomach dropped. The notary stamp was clean, too clean. The name familiar, a firm our family used for years. I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person I knew would understand. Ethan picked up on the second ring. Still allergic to pleasantries, he joked. I didn't laugh. I have a document, I said, voice flat. It's got my signature, but I didn't sign it. He was silent for a beat. Send it over. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Incoming call, Ethan Lau. Yeah, he said, no greeting this time. That's forged. Sloppy too. I exhaled, slow, measured. Can we prove it? Absolutely. The notary closed his practice last year. And the file's metadata says it was modified by Dorian's assistant. The silence on my end wasn't shock, it was confirmation. They were prepping to take it, I said. They already did, Ethan corrected. They just haven't filed it yet. I leaned back, hand drifting to the silver watch on my desk. It ticked softly in the quiet. How bad do you want this reversed? My fingers curled around the chain. Not reversed, I said. Recovered and exposed. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the microwave clock, 2:43 a.m. The bruise on my temple had begun to swell, a muted purple stretching toward my hairline. I didn't ice it. Let it mark me. Let it stay. On the table in front of me, a folder from Ethan. Inside, authorization to begin legal proceedings. Asset protection. Fraud reporting. Full property reclamation. My name was typed neatly on the first page, just above the blank line for my signature. My fingers brushed the edge of the silver pocket watch beside it. I wound it absently, listening to the slow, deliberate ticking. Each second landed with weight. I hadn't opened this watch in years. My father gave it to me on my 30th birthday. Said, there's power in timing, but more in silence. Funny how I didn't understand it until now. They hit me. They lied. They forged my name. And when I bled, they stood still. No apology, no regret. Just quiet calculation and a twisted sense of entitlement they wrapped in the word family. I uncapped the pen. Not for vengeance, not even for closure, but because what's stolen must be seen, and I would no longer stay unseen. I signed my name slowly, deliberately, with a hand that didn't shake. Then I whispered into the stillness, they took from the wrong daughter. I didn't go to war with shouting. I went to war with documents. By Monday morning, Ethan had filed the first packet, cease and desist, asset injunction, intent to pursue fraudulent misrepresentation. A legal cocktail designed to freeze every move Dorian could make. He emailed it to the county clerk, the state register, and most deliciously to Dorian's office with the subject line. Immediate compliance required. Property violation. I imagined the moment Dorian opened it, probably in his glass office surrounded by assistants too afraid to say his coffee was too cold. Meanwhile, I was in my apartment, the only sound the whir of the electric kettle and the ticking of my father's watch. I didn't flinch. I didn't wait. I brewed coffee strong enough to wake the ghosts and sat down to write the second blow. This one wasn't legal, it was public. To press at bayledger.com. CC. Monarch Bay Ethics Forum, Legal Watch, California. Subject. Concerning public interest, transfer of assets under duress. Attachments. Forged deed. Metadata showing alteration dates. Statement from former notary confirming falsified involvement. My own sworn affidavit notarized that morning. In the body I wrote, if legacy requires erasure, it is no longer legacy. Attached is everything they hoped no one would check. I read it twice, then clicked send. By Wednesday, the Bay Ledger published, Heir or Hostage Monarch Bay Dynasty Under Legal Fire. The article ran with a side-by-side of my real signature and the forged one. It didn't name me directly, but people knew. They always do. My phone buzzed with texts I didn't answer. Is this really about your condo? Are you okay? Are you sure this should be public? I turned it off. Let the silence do its work. That afternoon, Ethan called. We've got motion, his assistants already resigned. Sent a statement. What kind of statement? He read it over the line. I was instructed by Mr. Rourke to prepare documents that mimicked Miss Celeste Rourke's handwriting. I was told she would sign once the family had reached emotional consensus. I no longer feel ethically safe remaining in this position. I leaned back in my chair. Emotional consensus. Is that what they called cornering someone? The next step was symbolic. We prepared an official title claim based on my grandmother's original deed to Rourke Manor. Turns out the transfer to my parents had never been formally recorded. They'd been living in a house they didn't legally own. I asked Ethan to courier the packet himself. I want the envelope delivered straight to the gate. No email, no PDF. He paused. You sure? I nodded. Let them open something real for once. Thursday morning, I watched from across the street as a navy-suited courier handed a thick envelope to a stunned butler at Rourke Manor. Ethan texted me a photo not of the delivery, but of the signed receipt with my name on it. Celeste Rourke, right where they didn't want it. That night, I wrote a single line on my private feed. They raised me to be obedient. They forgot to raise me to be blind. No hashtags, no photos, no reply. It was enough. By Friday, Dorian's firm had entered crisis mode. Investors pulled out quietly. A board meeting was called with only 4 hours' notice. Someone leaked internal memos showing that he'd been using family assets to secure loans before. They were legally his. The phrase unauthorized leverage appeared in a Forbes comment section, and just like that, the dynasty cracked. I wasn't finished. While Ethan prepped final motions to pursue full reclamation, I emailed a speech to the organizers of the Monarch Bay Real Estate Transparency Summit. I didn't ask to speak. I gave them a choice. If you want to talk about legacy, let's talk about who gets a race to build it. The organizer called back within 2 hours. We have a 7-minute slot on the second day. Will you take it? I'll take it all, I replied. That weekend, I stood in front of 200 industry leaders, wearing the same gray coat I'd worn the night of the party, still faintly stained inside the collar. I didn't hide it. I began without preamble. My name is Celeste Rourke. A month ago, I was told my family's legacy was more important than my name. They forged it, tried to file it, and expected me to disappear. You could hear a pin drop in the ballroom. I ended with this: silence doesn't mean consent. Sometimes it means calculation. And sometimes the quietest one in the room is building something louder than the chandelier ever could. Applause came slow then built, not because it was triumphant, because it was undeniable. Back home, I reread Ethan's final memo. Judicial order grant of property ownership to plaintiff Celeste Rourke. All counterclaims denied. Court recommends further investigation into financial misconduct. Underlined at the bottom, you may now initiate eviction protocol. The irony, they had 21 days to vacate the Rourke Manor, the same amount of time they once gave me to reconsider what's best for the family. I didn't throw a press conference, I didn't post receipts. I made one final move. I signed the ownership transfer of Rourke Manor to a women's legal foundation for $1. When the executive director asked why, I told her, because this house raised people who thought blood was the same as permission. Let it raise something better now. As I sealed the last envelope, I glanced at the silver pocket watch ticking softly on my shelf. The same watch they thought meant nothing. The one my father gave me when I turned 30. There's power in timing, but more in knowing when not to wait. I pressed it closed, then picked up my pen and wrote the final sentence of the final file that would make everything they built legally irreversible. No anger, no tears, just signature, ink, wait, silence, and this time mine. The hearing was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. sharp. Monarch Bay's courthouse sat perched on a hill, white columns trying too hard to look noble. A building that once terrified me, now just another room where truth would be unboxed. I arrived 15 minutes early, pressed navy blouse, low heels, no makeup, no pearls. I wasn't there to impress, I was there to expose. Ethan was already seated at our table, papers stacked in a precisely ruthless order. He looked up at me and gave a single nod. That was enough. Dorian arrived at 9:02, as if the entire proceeding had been scheduled around his convenience. He wore a slate gray suit with no tie top button, casually open, like he was walking into a boardroom, not a courtroom. Behind him, our mother, Henrietta Rourke, classic wool coat, dark lipstick, grim as ever. She didn't meet my eye, but her gaze flickered toward the bandage just beneath my hairline. The last fading mark of the night she pretended not to see. Inside the room was quiet, formal, deliberate. No jury, just a judge, 2 clerks, a stenographer, and 5 reporters in the back, phones in hand. The judge began by reviewing the complaint filed under emergency injunction. Allegations of property forgery, asset coercion, and intentional misrepresentation of a living heir's signature. I didn't flinch, I didn't blink. I let Ethan do the speaking. Your Honor, what we submit today is not just a technical dispute over real estate. It is the deliberate erasure of a legal right, a legacy carried out through fraud, coercion, and family manipulation. He handed over the exhibits, the fake deed, my real signature sample, the assistant's metadata, the notarization that happened 3 months after. The notary's license had expired. When Dorian took the stand, his lawyer tried the soft approach. Family dynamics are complex, he began. Miscommunication, emotional pressure. My client believed Miss Rourke had verbally agreed. I raised an eyebrow. She never signed anything under duress. The family simply moved forward under the assumption of mutual consent. Consent, is that what they called silence now? Dorian shifted in his seat, trying to appear calm, but the sweat pooling beneath his collar told the truth. The judge asked a single question, Mr. Rourke, when was this document signed by your sister? Dorian cleared his throat. I believe it was last spring, around March. Ethan stood. We have proof this document was edited in May from a device registered to his assistant. Additionally, the notary listed was not licensed at the time of stamping. The judge looked over his glasses. Is that accurate, Mr. Rourke? Dorian paused. Too long. Yes, he finally muttered, but no further questions. Ethan cut in. It was surgical, precise, deadly. Outside, the press waited like vultures in tailored suits. Inside, the ruling came fast. This court recognizes Celeste Rourke as the sole legal heir to the Rourke Manor estate, per the last recorded deed and the verified will of Eleanor Rourke. All actions taken by Rourke Holdings to transfer ownership are rendered void. Further inquiry into fraudulent misrepresentation is authorized. Gavel, bang, like thunder inside my chest. But I didn't smile. Justice wasn't triumph. It was correction. A realignment of what should have never been bent in the first place. Mother didn't speak to me outside the courthouse. She stood near Dorian, who looked pale and shaken, jaw clenched hard enough to splinter enamel. Henrietta's mouth moved, but her words were for the reporters, not for me. This has been a painful family misunderstanding. We ask for privacy during this difficult time. Not an apology, not even an acknowledgement. I turned to leave but paused beside her just long enough to say, You taught me to stay quiet. You just never thought I'd learn how to stay firm. She didn't react, but her fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. Why? In the weeks that followed, the scandal made its way through every social circle in Monarch Bay. Podcasts discussed it. Finance blogs posted think pieces titled, When Dynasty Becomes Theft. A case study in family control. Dorian's firm lost 3 major investors. His name was quietly removed from a redevelopment project he'd once bragged would cement his legacy. And as for Rourke Manor, I owned it now, every inch, every hinge, every chandelier. I could have lived there, but I didn't. Instead, I sold it to a women's legal foundation that specialized in transitional housing for survivors of financial abuse. Price $1. Let them turn the drawing rooms into classrooms, the wine cellar into a library, the ballroom into a haven. A different kind of legacy, one no trust fund could buy. When asked for a public statement, I offered only this. What was taken in silence can be reclaimed in truth. This home now belongs to those who never had one. No hashtags, no interviews, just closure. Back in my apartment, I dusted off the silver pocket watch, still ticking, still defiant. I placed it on the shelf beside my grandmother's photo, and as the sun fell across the windowsill, I whispered one thing to the stillness of the room. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration. Then I closed the blinds, poured a cup of coffee, and watched the day end on my terms in my home. No noise, no spectacle, just peace. I never walked back into Rourke Manor, not as its owner, not as its daughter, not even as its ghost. But 6 months later, I stood across the street, coffee in hand, watching the front gates open to a group of women and children laughing as they carried donated books into the foyer. The sign above the door read, The Eleanor Foundation, a place to begin again. Someone had planted lavender where the fountain used to be. The marble tiles were gone. In their place, chalk drawings of rainbows and names written in crayon. It didn't make me cry, it made me exhale. My story didn't end with revenge. It began again with refusal. Refusal to accept silence as love. Refusal to define loyalty as submission. Refusal to be erased because I made people uncomfortable. Justice isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's permission to walk away, to build something better from the ashes they handed you. Later that evening, I sat by my apartment window, the same view I once thought was too small. Now it felt perfectly mine. I poured tea, ran my fingers along the glass case that held my father's pocket watch. It still ticked, still steady, still here. I didn't need their apology. I never did. I had the deed. I had my name. And I had peace. What they tried to forge, I reclaimed with ink and fire. And I left the smoke behind me. If you've ever had to choose between being quiet or being whole, you know what this story really is? Not a revenge, a reckoning, and maybe just maybe a homecoming. On your own terms.